4 hours, 1 minute and 57 seconds this afternoon when the budget statement does get tabled and read in Parliament. Of course, the perspective here being that this budget is actually 2.6 trillion shillings. And indeed, the figure of 2.3 trillion had come up earlier in the year that was tabled, but then expanded to about 2.7 trillion shillings because of various priorities that had to be brought in, various projects, and of course, a lot of funding for things like, of course, we have talked about money that has to go to MPs and senators as a send-off package. We have cash that is going to civil servants and many other issues that have been prioritized. Well, back to our panel now with some more insight into that budget conversation. And before we crossed over to Parliament, Grace, we had been at the point of talking about a capital gains tax and whether this had actually had its introduction had brought about any serious impact into the amount of revenue we were generating.
Okay, so initially when the reintroduction, because capital gains tax had been suspended in 1985, and then it was reintroduced through the Finance Act of 2014. So initially, you know, listed securities, non-listed securities, and then property was subject to CGT. But I think there was lobbying, and then listed securities were dropped off. But then there was also a case, LSK went to court because of the uncertainty as to what point tax was payable on property, CGT, and they won the case. So the ruling was that it was unconstitutional to demand for tax before property is transferred. So in that regard, I'm not sure how much the government is collecting. Well, the thing is, for all these initiatives that we've had over the years, we are not, I don't think they're documented. Well, I've tried to do a bit of research, but it's important to actually document all the initiatives that we've had, ITAX, all the amnesties, CGT, residential rental, the tax amnesty on foreign source income. If that was documented, then it would probably be easier for the Revenue Authority to be able to identify where they're getting it right and where they're also going wrong. And then just as Mutula has mentioned, you know, how many Kenyans are paying taxes as they should? How many are not paying as they should? So if that's all balanced, then we'll probably be able to meet our targets.
We have just about 3 minutes left before the end of this interview. And I want to spend it amongst all of us talking about, because we are seeing all these demands for more money across the economy. We have doctors, we have MPs, we have civil servants. Wouldn't we rather be addressing, Ken, the crux of the matter, which is the cost of living? How do we go about ensuring that we start to bring down the cost of living across the board for all Kenyans?
That's a fantastic point. And I mean, obviously I come into this discussion as an economist. And we saw the inflation numbers really going way beyond what the central bank's upper limit of 7.5 is. Although they say that's due to the drought, it's not. It wasn't really a demand-driven inflation. But you're right. When the typical Wanjiko today at 3 p.m. Listens to the budget today, she's going to ask, is the cost of living for her going to go up? The cost of unga, the cost of power, the cost of the household goods. And I think the government has been very strategic to try and avoid adding additional levies on what you call the household items. And to that extent, I think the Kenyans will be happy. But to the extent that the country A is slowing down, B, the country doesn't seem, since 2015, we've seen a gradual reduction of growth to the credit to the private sector. So we have a budget that is being read during a very economically tough time. So I think for the ordinary Mwananchi who doesn't understand what deficits mean, what does debt mean, I think for them, the key question is the country financially going in the right direction? People are expecting the standard gauge railway to come, which is going to reduce possibly the cost of doing business. Probably the manufacturing area is going to look at the cost of power. Then obviously the cost of labor. But for me, the bigger issue I think we need to look at is these revenue leakages. And even beyond the revenue leakages, there are some sectors in this economy that are not contributing their fair share of taxes. If you look at land rates, for example, the last time land in Nairobi was valued was 1980. So we are paying 17% of 1980 rates. Which is so if that amount, if can we revalue the Nairobi land and people start paying, you can imagine how much appreciation land has happened over the last 35 years. So we are losing local revenue in that.
Christopher, just to bring in at this point, the fact that the cost of living continues to be something that bears down on everybody across this economy. Of course, the conversation is how would these what measures would be put in place in this budget, if it were up to you, to be able to spread the benefits of either be it taxation, be it some other means of relieving the pressure on Wanjiko?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll answer your question first.
Yes.
So when it comes to household items or commodities, pricing,
yes,
let's assess the role of the government. The role of the government is, by the time the pricing is at the retailer level,
yes,
it has gone through. It has been manufactured first.
Then wholesale.
It has been sold by. It has gone all the way to the retailer. But granted, the government hasn't. Is not levying any VAT.
Yes.
You'll find most household items are zero rated. So the government doesn't take.
Yes.
Yeah. So going back, then it's only on the costing of those items. He alluded to energy. I think at the start during the old regime, there was an appreciation that energy cost is expensive in Kenya, and therefore there have been measures to change not only the source but even the pricing. So we've gone more geothermal, more wind, which is supposed to be cheaper. So that should translate onto the costing of those items. That's the intervention. Okay. The SGR should also intervene to the extent of then reducing the costs, transportation, lead time, up to...
Because we are out of time, I have to interrupt you there. But before we go, Grace, just to bring you in very quickly. Last year we saw an increase in the price of women consumed goods, hair products, things like that. Do you expect any sort of blows like that this time, even as the government has said no tax increases?
Being an election year, you couldn't expect, we don't know what we're expecting, but anything could come along to make sure that we vote for the government of the day.
Indeed. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to talk to us. It has been an inspiring conversation. Of course, this conversation continues. We expect the budget statement to be ready in just about 3 hours, 54 minutes and 41 seconds from now. And for much more on that conversation, I want to bring in my colleague Betty Keller, who is with us here in studio, just to take it on from here. We will, of course, be back with much more analysis as the show continues, especially in view of the fact that we are on a countdown that should get you to Parliament at just about 3 p.m. Betty.